Good morning, students, and thank you for giving me a little of your time to review this important information. Today is our annual civility and social media discussion. So just a reminder about civility, and I think it's important in today's climate to look at what civility does mean, because you don't see it a lot. In social media, you don't see it. You don't even see it from our political leaders, unfortunately, in today's society. So the civility is defined as disagreeing without disrespect, the ability to seek common ground, and really it's just listening. So when we talk about being civil in class, there's going to be people that you have differing opinions from. It might be your students, it might be your teachers. So it's understanding that having a difference of opinion is okay, but treating each other disrespectfully and rudely is not part of what we would allow in our current classrooms. So I also want to talk to you about pride. So our PBIS acronym is Pride of Mount Whitney. So to go back over that means positivity, trying to be positive in everything we do, finding the positive in each outcome, and finding a positive resolution for each situation that we find ourselves in. Having respect for yourself, having respect for your peers, having respect for teachers and faculty, and most importantly, having respect for your family. And then integrity. What we do matters, how we do it matters, and most importantly, how we do it when no one's looking is one of the most important, because that's about having integrity, doing things the right way because you know it's the right way, not just because somebody's watching. Determination. This is a tough one in today's day and age. It's trying to overcome those obstacles when you find difficult challenges, as you see things that are outside of what your normal comfort zone is. It's having the determination to face them and then work through those issues. And then engagement. Being engaged in what goes on in your classrooms, being engaged with your community, and being engaged in your family. So taking the time and putting down the devices, taking the time and getting away from the electronics when you can. Unfortunately, that's how we have to communicate right now. But when you can, face-to-face conversations and being truly engaged. When you're online, that means leaving your video on when you can and truly taking part in what's going on in the lessons. So I also need to talk about bullying. Bullying is one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot. Typically when we hear it, it's not bullying. It's people being rude, and I'll talk about harassment and those types of things in a few minutes. But first we want to address bullying. Bullying happens over time. Bullying's not one instance. It doesn't happen just one time. It happens over a series of events. It typically is an inequity in power, but not always. It can be student to student, and it could be done through a variety of means. It can be physical, it could be written, it could be verbal, it could be over the computer, which is cyberbullying. But it's done to intimidate somebody and create an imbalance of power, to set up where somebody is superior to somebody else. So if you are part of bullying, if you feel you've been bullied, if you have seen bullying, then we do ask that you contact the hotline that's listed on the page here. It's also posted on our webpage, and we do address it very severely. It's something we take very seriously, but know that one time that somebody was unkind doesn't necessarily constitute bullying. That's a different matter. So harassment. So harassment can be a one-time thing, and harassment doesn't have to be intentional. To be harassed, it's more about perception than it is intent. And it could be, I'll describe a variety of types of harassments in a few minutes, but harassments come from not necessarily a specific target. So it doesn't have to be, myself going after somebody else and saying unkind things. That is harassment as well. But it could be just posting inappropriate comments in a chat room. It could be posting inappropriate memes. Those are all types of harassment that we need to look at and deal with. And some are more severe than others. If the harassment is aimed at a protected class of people, such as gender, sexual orientation, race, those are much more serious than if it's a much more benign type of harassment that somebody unknowingly is offensive and being offensive towards another group. Then we can really, that's just a discussion to try to correct that inequity. So going over types of harassment. So the first one, obviously verbal. So derogatory comments, jokes. It could be racial slurs. Verbal abuse can take on many natures. When you're insulting and rude to other people, that's a type of harassment. To kind of redefine harassment also creates what we call a hostile education or a hostile work environment. If by your harassment, you create a situation where somebody is uncomfortable being in class, being on a Zoom session, being at school, that harassment has to be dealt with because we have to create safe spaces for everybody to participate in the educational environment. Physical harassment, probably not as big a deal right now since most of us aren't physically present with each other, but unnecessarily offensive blocking of movement, touching somebody, could be, physical harassment can also be fighting in some regard. Visual, derogatory, like I said, posters, memes, etc. These are definitely or typically done outside electronic means because we also get to electronic harassment, which is our most prevalent. I also want to address sexual harassment. Again, probably not something we're seeing a lot of right now since nobody's in contact with one another, but it can be unwelcome advances towards another person, unwelcome propositions. One time, typically we just make corrections. If it happens pervasively or ongoing, then it's something we have to address much more seriously. And then finally, the electronic, it's our biggest problem in public schools because it's email, social media, things that you say on social media that are hurtful towards somebody else. And we often find people say stuff that they're much more willing to be rude or negative in social media than they would ever do in person. And so I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about social media. And then as a reminder, also hate speech. Hate speech is something abusive and threatening directed at somebody else. You're directing it at another person or another group of people, and it's typically prejudicial against that particular group. And typically it is something we have to deal with much more severely. As a reminder, hate speech is not protected under the First Amendment. A lot of times we'll get people that come in and say, well, I have the right to say whatever I want. As a former civics teacher, I can tell you that's absolutely not true. You don't have the right to say whatever you want because some things aren't protected under the Constitution. Things such as hate speech, harassment, intimidation, bullying, those are not protected speech. So you don't have the right to say those things without consequences. So those could include suspension or even consequences with the police. So just be aware that you don't have the right to say anything and everything. So social media, biggest single problem we have in education today. And most of us use it. Looking on this, I have 4 accounts on these social media outlets, but I know it's also a big problem because people are willing to do things and say things on social media that they would never do in person, and that causes a problem. So what I want you to remember, if somebody is rude to you or you need to retaliate or get back, we think about the acronym FIRE. So take feel. First thing in FIRE, feel. Take stock of your emotions. Are you mad? Are you sad? Are you anxious? Are you jealous? Do you feel excluded or uncomfortable? So how do you feel? And understand how you feel or whatever was done to you or around you, how'd that make you feel? And then identify what it is that caused those feelings. What happened? And then reflect on what could happen from your response. So if what you do could cause more problems, then think about doing it. And then take steps to make action. Positive action. Try to be positive in your outcomes. Because the next slide I'm going to talk to you about is digital is permanent. So if you do something in anger in the middle of the night, wherever you do it, if it comes onto this campus, then we have the right and the responsibility to deal with it. And unfortunately, that means sometimes people get in a lot of trouble. It could be trouble with school, it could be trouble with home, and then ultimately could end up in trouble with the police department. So make sure what you're doing doesn't get you into trouble. And I say digital is permanent because social media apps, some people think they go away or they limit access or only my friends can see what I post. That's not true. Please don't believe that. Please don't fall into that trap because social media is open. People that really want to see what you have to post can find ways to see what you have to post. And there's always that one friend that reposts something, and then it goes to hundreds, if not thousands of other people. So be careful what you post. I also say be careful what you post because people post pictures of themselves, sometimes either being inappropriate, so sending that one post or one picture to that special friend that would never share those intimate photos, or sharing that one post that's derogatory or rude or mean to that one friend that would never share, and it gets shared. It gets shared often, and we find that more often than not it gets shared, and it's permanent. We have had issues where people did things inappropriate, and then they grew up. But 4 or 5 years later, that same post comes back because it's permanent, and people hold them accountable to what they did 4 or 5 years ago inappropriate on social media. So please don't limit your future today by what you're posting. So think before you post. Think long and hard before you post. And as I've said many times, if you can't say it in person, if you can't look somebody in the eye and tell them what you're thinking, you probably should not post it because it's probably not appropriate. All right, I want to switch gears because I know a lot of people have been struggling of late with how to navigate their online lessons and how to navigate and be appropriate in class. So one, as a reminder from the earlier this morning, be respectful of others. Make sure that you're respectful in your comments. Make sure you're respectful in the chat rooms. Make sure you're respectful in what you post. That goes a long way. If you're speaking or writing, be clear and be concise. You don't have to ramble on and on to get a point across. Think about what you write, organize your thoughts, and be clear about what you want to write. We have free Grammarly. I've sent everybody an email. If you don't have it, you can email me and I'll make sure that you do get it. But use Grammarly. It's a pretty easy tool, and it really does help with your spelling and grammar. If you'd used it before you submitted your work, you'd find that you'd get almost all the credit as long as you followed the guidelines. Be on time for your Zoom sessions and stay for the entire session. You'd be amazed at what you can learn when you listen. So stay on the entire session until the teacher dismisses you. And if you have questions, ask those questions. And make sure if you mute yourself, if there's unforeseen disruptions in your home. Things happen. We know things happen. The dog starts barking crazy. Somebody starts yelling at somebody in the next room. So just mute yourself so that can pass and you can get back to going about your lessons. And dress for school. For heaven's sakes, you don't need to be Zooming from your bed in your PJs. So put on your school clothes, get ready for school, comb your hair, brush your teeth, get ready, and then sit down for class so that you're prepared for class. And then the other problem that we see a lot of right now is organization. People are trying to do the work, but they're losing assignments, they're misplacing assignments. So first up is have a defined workspace separate from where you relax. I know that's not always possible in your home, but like I said earlier, try not to Zoom from your bed. So if you're Zooming and your classroom is your bedroom, then try to find a separate space. Either it's a desk, a big shelf space, someplace that you can put the Chromebook that's not where you typically relax, so that you have a separation. You'd be surprised at what it does for your mentality when you have a workspace and a relaxation space. It really does help. Organize your digital files. Use your Google Drive, make folders, keep things organized, organize them by week, organize them by due date, so that when you get ready to turn things in, you know where they're at and you don't have to look through everything. Try to minimize your distractions. I know for some this is easier than others, especially if there's 3 or 4 of you Zooming from home. That can be a little chaotic. when you get dropped from the sessions and you have to log back in. But the more you can do upfront to minimize your distractions, the better off you'll be. Organize your time. This is the number one killer for teenagers. So know when your Zoom sessions are. Know when your assignments are due. Know when you have a test coming up that you have to study for. Know when there's projects due. So if you have all that on a calendar and you know when things are happening, then you can also structure and organize. This is free time. I have time to goof off and do what I want to do. And you know when you don't have time to do that, so that you can structure your time. And if there's demands from home or you have a job, you can include those demands. And so you can really structure your time and know when you have things due. And then when you have off time, you can relax because you know you've done your part and you have time to relax. And then get into routines. Set up certain times. So you're supposed to Zoom at certain times in the morning or the afternoon. And in the morning session or whichever session you're not Zooming, set up those times so that you can then do your asynchronous or your classwork as the Schoology. And so you're not always behind. You're not always struggling to get things done. You're not always last minute. And I know that's a struggle for a lot of teenagers. So try to get into routines and plan, calendar, organize. Those will all help alleviate the stress of our current distance learning platform. So I want to thank you guys for your time, and I hope you have a really good day. Thanks and goodbye.